Kabbalah offer people specific solutions for everyday life?
No, general and for the entirety of lifetimes.
Yes. So, do you know what we mean by a self-help book? Is there in Kabbalah the material for doing a self-help book?
Self-help, but for the whole of life and for all reincarnations, but not how to be healthier, more successful, pretty, or skinny. Nothing relating to succeeding in our life, no.
Well, no, that's fine. Well, even including success with other people, in dealing with people.
When a person studies, as a result, he certainly succeeds more in understanding other people and in seeing the world more correctly because he understands the world better in general. But not that it helps him do some magic trick. It doesn't give him the ability to manipulate other people.
Oh, no. Well, what we usually mean by a self-help book is not one that involves manipulating people. It's understanding relationships with people and being more successful in the life you create for yourself by understanding people and understanding how their problems and understanding how to deal with them.
This is also something that it doesn't do. Kabbalah connects a person to the upper force. It doesn't deal with this world at all. It can be compared to children who are playing their games on the floor, and next to them there are those that have already ascended above that level, and they get to do serious work. So Kabbalah leaves all of the games on the level of this world and elevates a person to a different level. By doing that, it solves problems of the human being. Every other method, even if it's sold under the name of Kabbalah, teaches how to succeed in these games. Actually, Kabbalah does come to help man, but I repeat that its uniqueness is in the fact that it gives man a higher fulfillment. Not money, not respect.
Yeah, no, I understand all that. But my whole point is, the point I'm trying to make is, if you can, I mean, it's not Kabbalistic terminology, but if you think of yourself, as many of these teachers talk, as a human and a divine, you have both parts, higher self, lower self. If you're able to move to the higher self, the perspective of the higher self, and you see yourself as a divine being at the soul level, it changes your relationship with all these other problems, even though it doesn't address them directly.
Of course, of course.
That's what I think we have to emphasize in this book. That's the key.
An individual sees the whole world as a means for spiritual ascent.
Right, so you're less attached to, I'm not getting along with my wife, or I'm not the exact body shape.
Of course, of course. One uses all these things purposefully. We function in this world according to our ego, which constantly grows. This ego needs to go through several levels in its growth until it reaches a level that it can't fill itself. And that's what's starting to happen in humanity at this time. That's the reason for the global crisis and all that an individual has to deal with in this world, the crisis of family, education, and even the general perception of who he is and what the point of his life is. Man can't find a reason for life, and so he looks for an escape in drugs. We do anything to keep ourselves occupied so that we don't feel empty. And all that has a goal. It's in order for us, after we've evolved, having gone through many reincarnations, and have accumulated a lot of bitter experience in all our previous incarnations and in this life, that we are forced to face the question, what is the meaning of life? We're still trying somehow to quench that question when it arises, but soon people will not be able to do that. Even drugs won't help. They'll loathe them. They will simply feel a terrible void, and this is what brings humanity on a political level to a Nazi regime and to terror. It was written in the book of Zohar, and this book hasn't lied or made any mistakes in the last 2,000 years. It says that if we don't begin by ourselves to change the situation, we will reach a Nazi regime in all the developed countries, and we'll have a third world war. Why is there a need to bring us to such a situation? That after the development from generation to generation, now we've reached a situation that our emptiness comes because we don't feel the source of life. Where are we from? And what are we here for? This is the question that we need to solve, because it is initially found in our egoistical desire, and that brings it to us, because our egoism has to bring us to divinity, to the upper force. So the wisdom of Kabbalah, which has been hidden by Kabbalists themselves through all the years, since the beginning of history, is now being revealed as a means for filling that emptiness, in order to help man feel the upper reality, or the upper force. If one doesn't reach it, he will simply remain empty without any solution. And we've seen this problem for decades now. Our experience shows that when we present the wisdom of Kabbalah to people, it opens their eyes. It gives them vigor in life. It gives them a new life. And I'm speaking from experience with students, groups of students throughout the world, thousands of people in our network. The realization of the fact that our life has a purpose and that the goal needs to be revealed to us, because that's what we need to discover. The wisdom of Kabbalah was given to the Jewish nation, and that's why it's called the chosen people. It needs to be a light to the other nations, as written, in order to pass this wisdom on to humanity once it is grown. As long as we don't convey the wisdom of Kabbalah, anti-Semitism is going to increase. And conversely, the more that we do deliver it, we will be privileged with the opposite, with admiration from the rest of the nations. We have students who are Arab, German, French, Italian, Turkish. They had no love for Jews before. I have students who have swastikas tattooed on their arm. My group of German students had their picture taken on Hitler's parade stadium. In other words, Kabbalah is the salvation for our nation. And as much as humanity will advance, anti-Semitism will escalate, even in nations who never heard or saw us. Because when man evolves, though he doesn't know why, within him he feels this emptiness, and he feels that the Jews have the solution. So, first of all, it's a solution for us, and secondly, for the whole world. We're all in this together, and we're carrying out our obligation.
Just out of curiosity, in terms of the souls and the whole cosmology of Kabbalah, how many souls are Chinese?
You can't count souls by heads, because a soul is like an electrical current that you repeatedly split. It can arrive through a large tube or divided into thousands of small tubes. By disseminating the wisdom of Kabbalah in the world, we only want one thing, that people will know that our evolution in this world includes such a state that one realizes that his life is meaningless. I do not know how to escape this question nor answer it. And in that state, Kabbalah is the method of revealing light to such a person. People have to identify with what the wisdom of Kabbalah offers. And if not, then it's not for him. They need to grow more, maybe a few more years. I don't decide for man whether he needs to come and learn Kabbalah. Again, if man has grown, if he's matured, and if he has a burning question, and he doesn't know why he exists, what his purpose is, then this method is for him. Otherwise, it's not. There are billions of people in the world today that are in this crisis. Depression is the #1 illness, and drugs are the second one, and they are really the result of that. And even cancer is a direct result of an ego that can't find itself, and it starts to eat itself on a bodily level. Also, the crisis of families. So many people are getting divorced, and it's a problem even with the children. Today, in the world, there are millions, even billions of people who need this. And we see this according to research. So, we have to explain to them about the cure. I don't mean that there are only a few people in the world who need Kabbalah either. I mean, we don't introduce it by force. It's not like Pepsi or Coke, and it can't be marketed that way.
But to dangle the bait means to get people interested, to stimulate a curiosity for knowing more.
I want them to know that Kabbalah provides the answer to one question: what is the purpose of my existence? My purpose is for whoever's ready, that they should know that it exists, and in this we're changing the world.
I think you're going to say no to this, but I want to ask the question anyway. If you have a group of students who come to you for a period of time, not just for an afternoon, and you want to convey to them the essence of Kabbalah, the principles, the basic ideas, are there 5 or 12 or some specific number of ideas that you want to convey to them?
Ken?
Yes. There are?
Yes.
Good. About how many?
There are maybe 3, 4, or 5 principles. Okay, let's say 5. First of all, that there's an upper force that we all live in. And we are the egoistic parts that are opposite to it. Our egos evolve, as we said, for the past few thousand years in this world. At the end of this development, we will reach a state that we have to unify with this force. Who are we? That's the second principle. This upper force is entirely good, bestowing and giving, and it created us opposite itself as egoists, in order that the ego will develop in us to a point where we can reveal that our nature is destructive, and that there's nothing worse than it. And that we want to burst out of this in the same way that we would want to break free from an old skin, and to become like it. Then, by the method of Kabbalah, we will be able to become like it. The third principle, we are one soul, one egotistical desire that was created by the Upper One as one desire, the desire to enjoy. And we were shattered into thousands and millions of parts called individual souls. And they are what develops during this whole process. We have to correct ourselves to become like the Creator, and that means that we all need to unify together. All the souls have to come back into one soul together. Really, in the egotistical manner in which we are divided, we hate one another. And our correction is to be the opposite, that we should see that our ego is destructive and that we want to connect back together. The fourth principle, when we reach the immense destructive ego of our times that's starting to appear, we see just how bad it is. There are now two ways. To evolve either through the beatings that we receive, which is basically how we live our lives now, that we run away from suffering all the time. I'm not sure where I should run to, just as long as it's away from what's hurting me. Or that I reveal before me the goal by the method of Kabbalah, and I develop in this so that it will attract me to my development. The first is the path of evolution, and that's called the path of suffering. And the second path is called the path of light. And our choice is whether to evolve one way or the other, and all of the development of humanity until this time was without any freedom of choice. We were simply carrying out what the ego told us to do. Ego, DNA, it doesn't matter what you call it. Rather, people now have a desire that is for something beyond this world. They can't fill themselves with anything that they can find in this world. So they ask themselves why they exist, and they don't know why. Now they have the freedom of choice, either to continue in the path of suffering, like they did before, by getting punishment, or they can evolve towards the goal that is drawing them. The path of spiritual development, the minute that one discovers the wisdom of Kabbalah, he begins to learn, with the help of Kabbalistic books, about his more corrected and his more advanced state. And then, when he reads about it, he's drawn to this advanced state. Then he doesn't need any kind of affliction. Rather, he's constantly drawn to more advanced stages. But this is on the condition that he learns from genuine books of Kabbalah and from a correct guide. The only genuine Kabbalah books in our times, the book of Zohar, the writings of the Ari, and Bala Salam.
So what I want to talk about is first about your childhood and growing up.
I was born in White Russia in the year 1946 in the city of Vitebsk. My parents were doctors. I completed high school, and then I went to university. I wanted my education to answer the question of the essence of life. So I went into the most advanced field of study that there was at that time, biological cybernetics. This field studies how cells live. It studies what's in them, the programming that operates them, cause and effect relationships that define their existence.
Where did this interest in biological sciences in life come from?
The reason was that I felt emptiness in my life.
And an emptiness that his parents weren't able to explain or...
No, my parents gave me everything, just like any child in a Jewish family.
But they gave you everything intellectual but not spiritual?
Yes, of course. I received everything, including correct education. The question, though, it was burning inside of me. I thought that this field would help me to know a little bit more about this. For example, how a plant could come from something inanimate. How does it develop? What is the essence of the difference between these two things? Why, all of a sudden, it comes alive and it develops. I wanted, basically, to find an answer to this emptiness that I felt inside. What am I living for? I think every child has that question. Afterwards, it's suppressed by hormones, and also there was the influence of my environment. I, however, was not successful in forgetting that question. After university, I realized that I was left even emptier, and I saw that I couldn't advance anymore. I reached successes in my research, but I saw no future for me.
Because he was Jewish, or
especially because of this, yes. The authorities refused to let me emigrate. I spent 4 years trying, and it was only in 1974 that they gave me permission to go. So I moved from Belarus to Russia, and from Russia to Lithuania, and then in the year 1974, I arrived in Israel. I continued my research there, but I couldn't find any satisfaction in anything. I sensed that in the developed world I would be capable of finding it, but I was unsuccessful. I turned to people and organizations of all kinds, and I discovered nothing but emptiness everywhere I searched, until I was advised to look into religion. I went to religious people and I saw that they were even emptier than the rest. After some time, I was advised that the answers for what I was looking for might be found in something called Kabbalah.
Was there some particular person who told you that?
I was told this by people who were half religious, half secular.
And what work was he doing at the time?
At the time, I owned a dental clinic.
In order to tell the story, I would like to ask some questions that people would not ordinarily ask. Where did the money come from to start a dental clinic?
When I came to Israel, I went to work for the army. I worked there 4 years until 1978. My parents came to Israel in 1977. My father was a dentist, and my mother is a gynecologist. Because these professions are private in Israel, I opened a clinic for my father, and having done that, I realized that it was actually pretty easy to do. So I opened up 11 other clinics. And for that, I hired a group of doctors who worked in the field, and I opened these clinics, and I managed the clinics, and I was very well off. All the while, I was still searching, only this time I was searching among the Kabbalists, the way that I had been told. I went from one to another, but I found that they studied without actually having any understanding. They didn't address at all the question that I came to them with. They just read the Kabbalistic text, and I couldn't tell if there was anything to it. Until I found a person in Rehovot, the town that I lived in. He was just like me. He was a local Israeli. He could read Hebrew very well and Aramaic. And we started to study together every evening.
What was this man's name and what did he do?
His name was Chaim Malka, and he was a factory technician. We studied like this for about 2 years until we reached a situation where we had checked everybody out. And one evening I was so despaired I didn't know what to do. And suddenly I told him, let's go someplace that we've never been at all. Let's go to the city of Bnei Barak. Let's see if we can find someone who studies Kabbalah. It was an ultra-religious city, and I thought that maybe there we could find someone who could teach us real Kabbalah. So we saw in the books that there really was something about it, but we couldn't understand them. We were lacking the key. As a scientist, I had my reservations. I didn't want to open just any book. If I was going to learn something, I wanted to study from the true sources. If you want to learn physics, then you have to use a book of a well-known scientist in the field. The same is true with Kabbalah. So I wanted to study Zohar and the books of the Ari and of Baal Salam. You can find them here in the U.S., and there are millions of books, but none of them are real. In these real books, there are questions, but the answers, they're not clear. So when we reached a dead end, I was still drawn to Kabbalah. And I knew that at least it asked the right questions. And we were looking for the person who had the means of how to realize it, and not just hear about these questions. So I wanted to open it up for myself, just as we perceive this world. Feel and understand it. And so that evening I said, let's go to Bnei Barak. So we got into the car and we drove. We got to Bnei Barak, and it was a stormy, rainy winter evening. And we didn't know which way to turn. We didn't know where to go. So I opened up the window at one of the intersections, and I called out to a religious Jew that was standing there with an umbrella in the rain. Hey, where do they study Kabbalah around here? It was a really bizarre question to ask, but he wasn't surprised. He told me, okay, drive left to the garden, and then you'll find a few houses there, and in one of them, that's where they learn. So we drove in that direction, and we reached a field that he said was there, and there was a desolate house, and we went in. It seemed like a very large building, but inside there was only one dark room. And there were 5 or 6 old Jewish men sitting inside between about 70 or 80 years of age. And I asked them, are you learning Kabbalah here? I was a modern person from a very different world. I was dressed nicely. There was one who stood at the head of the table, and he told me, sit down. So we sat down near the table, and their lesson continued. And then suddenly I realized they were talking Yiddish and Aramaic, 2 languages that I absolutely lacked any knowledge of. We continued to sit there like this. In truth, I wanted to leave because I really saw no point in studying at this place. These old people sitting here obviously had nothing else to do, so they sit and read all types of things. My friend, who's very well-mannered, less ill-tempered person than I am, he said, let's sit. It's not proper to leave like this. The lesson finished, and the head of the group of these old people started to ask us who we were, where we came from. I told them that we were from Rehovot and that we wanted to learn Kabbalah, but we don't know where. So he told us, don't worry, I'll give you sources and you can learn with us. I told my friend, take the address from him if you want to, but I don't think this place is right for us. We already had seen such places. He took the address and the directions, and then that same person called him. And he came to my house the next evening, and he told me, we have a lesson tonight. I didn't really want to go because I was already despaired from all of that searching. But one more time he pressured me and told me that we should go, and so I went. The old man introduced us to one of his friends who was about the same age as him, and he told him, teach them. He took us to one of the corners in that really large hall, and he said, let's sit down, and we'll start reading what we usually teach to beginners. He started to teach us the introduction to the book of Zohar. Already after the first few words, I felt that it was a real explanation. Because he was asking and answering exactly the questions that we wanted to ask. Even before you ask the question, he asked the question for you, and immediately he answered them. That's how we found that place. Then we started to come 2 times a week, then every day. Soon we learned that they studied every day at 3 in the morning, so I started to come there at 3 in the morning. That's it. After a few months went by, after one of the morning lessons, our teacher told us that the main Rav, the head of the group of 6 old people, wanted to learn something special with me, so I agreed, of course. And he took me to his room, and he started to teach me something. In truth, I didn't understand anything. He took me inside and he taught me on a few occasions, but really, I didn't understand a word. Then he left me. He didn't call me anymore. I was furious. I didn't know what to do. But really, he was right. From this, I revealed an even bigger yearning inside of me that I really needed this. One morning, he had to visit a doctor urgently, and they asked me to take him in my car. And I took him to the doctor's, and they found that he had some problem with his ear, and that he needed to go to the hospital right away. And there they found that he needed to stay in intensive care. And I was with him the whole time. He spent a whole month in the hospital, and I was beside him. I used to come early in my car in the morning. I'd hop over the fence because the hospital authorities, they didn't allow visitors at that hour. So I used to go up to the 4th floor, and then I'd go into his room and we'd learn. It continued like this for about a month, and this is what tied us together. And after he left the hospital, it continued.
But the first time they started working together, the rabbi couldn't understand what he was teaching. How suddenly did it make sense?
Because in the hospital, he started to talk to me the way that one speaks to a little child. And on the other hand, he sent me home to bring him one of his special briefcases. And he used to give me a few things to read from this case, something handwritten. That helped me a lot. And every day when I came to him, he gave me a little more of this handwritten material.
These were things that he had written himself.
These were notes that he took from his father's words. Also, I didn't know certain things, and he'd explain them to me. So, little by little, he taught me how to see things. We continued to study together after he left the hospital, and I used to take him every morning. I'd take him in my car to the doctor's. We'd go to the beach, to other places. It went like this. From 3 to 6, we would study with the group. Then there was an hour's break. And then after that, we would go to the beach at around 12 or 1 p.m. And then in the afternoon, I would go to the clinic and check to see if everything was okay, and return and study a little more in the evening. After that, I used to return home late at night. And that continued until I left the clinics and I moved to be close to him. Then we started to leave the city once a week together, just to study for a few days. And that started to happen every week. We went to Tiberias, to Meron, to other special places. The book of Zohar was written in Meron.
Places, not places to see people, but to see the history of Kabbalah.
Historical? No, we didn't go visit people. We lived in an abandoned house there, all alone. We lived in an abandoned house, just us together, and I would study, and nobody was around, and it was in that manner that I slowly acquired the wisdom.
And the purpose of going to these other places?
The purpose of going to a place like that was that there was a special force. Every place on earth is under the influence of a specific force. That's why when people move from one place to another, their appearance changes with time, because the force that influences them changes. Even their character and mentality changes. So we used to go to such places, and it continued until he passed away in 1991.
How many years had they been together?
From 1979 to 1991.
And then, how did your life unfold from there?
What happened further? Even before that, in the year 1983, I wrote my first 3 books on Kabbalah. Because of those, there were already many people that knew about me. And even while I learned from him, I also gave lectures. And when he passed away, I started taking students. In the evening, we used to get together and study. I named the group after him, B'nai Baruch, the sons of Baruch. It's grown, and today it's become a very big group. I wrote dozens of books since then.
It sounds as if you moved very quickly from starting to study with him to beginning to write books about Kabbalah.
Yes, the first 3 books I wrote very quickly, 3 or 4 years after I started to study with him. It was, however, with his inspiration and agreement. Actually, I didn't write "there's something that was a renewal" or something that came from me, but rather the material that existed in the great books, which was passed through me, adapted in a simple way. Just as a student who writes only to the extent that he's able to comprehend. That's why until this day, these books are very popular.
And this was something new then, to write this knowledge in a simple way.
Yes, of course, it was revolutionary.
But your teacher had recognized that this was an important thing to do.
Yes, he was very supportive. He was very happy.
What did he see in you that made him choose you to do this?
First of all, I was very dedicated. I was by his side all the time. I came with a real need. And I didn't lose that desire along the way. That's usually the problem. Those who come to Kabbalah, they cool off after a certain time. Their regular life captures them. It attaches to all kinds of corporal desires. And I avoided that. That's it. Things turned out that way. What can I say? Other than that, I brought to him about 40 new students, young people in the year 1983 to 1984. We organized a group. They studied together with us. The connection between me and the Rebbe was nevertheless very special. Even if we were present at all kinds of events like weddings and ceremonies, I used to always be next to him. I was his spokesperson and assistant. And that's why when he passed away, in the obituary published in the ultra-Orthodox religious newspaper, they wrote that the great Kabbalist of our times passed away in the arms of his faithful student, Michael Laitman.
What was his personal feeling when his teacher died? Did he know that the teacher was near death, or was it sudden?
He fell ill quite often. I had such a feeling that our world was entering a new era, and that he gave everything that he was able to pass on. He didn't match our times. He wasn't able to change himself to match our times. As for me, I could continue to drink wisdom from him, but I felt that the old era of great Kabbalists was at an end, and that he was the last of the Mohicans. When he passed away, all types of changes started to happen in the world. Big ones, quicker and quicker. Modern-day phenomena started to appear. Terror, drugs, addiction, it all escalated. Miasmas of our day.
The description the rabbi gave did not sound as if he was sad at his teacher's passing. Did he see it as a time that had come?
No, I wasn't sad at all, really. Kabbalah opens a man's eyes to a wider world. He feels that there is neither life nor death in corporal matter. And our connection with Rav, on the level of souls, continues the same even after he's passed away. It's the same even now. Thus, there's no despair or any real sadness, because this person completed everything he had to do. His role on this earth in a full manner. He left students after him. You can only admire him and want to be like him. Other than this, we continued in the same path. His and the Kabbalists before him. I and my group of people go through the same process. The body plays absolutely no role in this. We don't relate to it that way. The connection is spiritual, and it stays just as it was before. I felt that a new era was beginning and that I really need to be more mature, more responsible. 6 months after that, my father passed away. And that's it. When I came back from his funeral, I opened my own group and I started to teach.
You say that your teacher was the last of the great Kabbalists.
Okay.
How do you know, what makes you say that the line ended there? In what way are you not the next of the great Kabbalists?
It's written in the book of Zohar, also by the Gaon of Vilna, and by Baal Salam, that in the year 1995, a new era in humanity begins. That humanity begins to develop a desire for the spiritual past all of the mundane desires. Whether we want it or not, precisely at this time. The second thing is that the method that he conveyed had such orthodox wrappings that it wasn't suitable for people in this modern time, in our times. The new method has to fit the masses and humanity as a whole. His method was that of the previous Kabbalists, and it was intended for individuals, where a teacher passed it on to his students just the way they had done through the generations. The new method has to be open before the entire world, and all the world has to be able to receive it, no matter who they may be.
In telling the story as part of the book, telling the story of your life, I want to know what the story is that we will tell after the death of your teacher.
Of course, I felt rather isolated. I was left alone. For about 12 years, I was close to that great man, and now I had to start anew. The method itself needed to be renewed, and it needed to fit a new generation of people. The new people started to come, and I learned on them how to develop a method that would match these new souls. And of course, without the group of students, I wouldn't be able to do it. I personally am not in need to have students near me. But in order to develop the method onward and to present it to the whole world, I need a laboratory where I can develop it, test it, and bring it to ripeness. Today we are still developing this method. From year to year, and we're succeeding to bring it closer and closer to humanity. But the principle is the same: to learn from the unique books of true Kabbalists, because only they can tell correctly about our spiritual state. And that's what we have to reach. When a man reads these books, he's drawn to it. So we only have to pass to him that internal action that he needs to perform to be spiritually uplifted.
The early part of your story, from the childhood in Russia through learning under the teacher, is a wonderful story, rich and colorful and meaningful. Are there events in your life since then that help a reader understand who you are and what you are doing that are as rich and colorful as those early parts?
Just as I described how I was close to my rabbi, so my students can tell you about me. To help you complete the story. Because I'm looking at this from the point of view of everyday work with the material that's before me. Daily lessons, publishing new books, how we are making films, appear before all kinds of media. We hold congresses every 6 months, opening new groups. It's only daily work. Of course, there are periods that we evolve spiritually to a new level, and we're privileged to open ourselves more to the public. My life revolves around Kabbalah. I have 3 children. My son is the distributor of my books in North America, and he lives in Canada.
Is his wife someone who was a student he met through the work in Kabbalah? Let me ask the question again. Where and how did he meet his wife?
I met my wife in Russia, and there we got married, and there my son was born. He was 2 when we came to Israel.
And was your wife a student then, or what was she doing?
No. My wife and I used to work in the same place. I was about 24, she was 18 or 19. My wife understood that I was always searching for the answer to the question about the meaning of life. She accepted it as my nature. But when I found Rebbe, and she saw how faithful I was, how I dedicated myself wholly to him, she sat and cried until I succeeded to slowly explain to her what I had found. She's truly a dedicated woman, and she is helping me today. And she went with me through all of my searches. When we moved to live close to Rebbe, she was dedicated to him also. She would take care of him. When his wife passed away, she used to cook for him and took care of him. She really did it with all of her heart, and he felt it. He was like a father for her. She lost her father in the Stalin period, and she felt towards him like he was her father.
This has been wonderful for me. The stories and the teaching are like a miracle. I'm eager to work on this book and to tell your story. It's a pleasure.